And we're back. Thank you. Mr. Sable.
First action item this evening. It is recommended that pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 3319.16, the Medina City Schools Board of Education consider referee Douglas Godshall's April 6, 2023 report regarding the termination of Nick Kaplak's supplemental contract.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve action item C1.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. West. Any board discussion regarding this opinion, or the consideration of the opinion?
I read the opinion, and I agree with the referee's report, which includes his findings of facts, opinions, and recommendations.
I'd like to add, I read the whole opinion and then all the associated documents that were with it, and considered the recommendation, so.
Yeah, I went through, read the opinion, the exhibits that were presented, all the additional documents that were associated with this, and yeah, considered the recommendation of the referee.
I've read everything, the recommendation, all the transcripts and all the exhibits that were presented, and I certainly think we need to consider this.
Thank you all. I as well, I believe I spent about 6 hours reading depositions, reviewing all of the exhibits. There's a 30-minute video from the school bus that is also mentioned in this opinion that I viewed in its entirety. And I do think that the referee did an excellent job of referencing all of the evidence and bringing everything all together in a concise, although it's 14 pages, in a concise way to present everything. So I do appreciate that. I do appreciate also on page 12, he talks that this is a troubling opinion for a referee. Because of Mr. Kaplak's years as a teacher and a coach, and that he looked at that as well as considering that the classroom is an extension, or I'm sorry, the athletic field is an extension of the classroom. So it was not taken lightly, and there was a lot of consideration put into this, and I do appreciate that. If there are no comments or questions from the board regarding the consideration of this opinion, we can take a vote. And Mr. Chambers, you may take that vote when you are ready.
Yes, Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board action item D1 is to accept or reject the referee's report, including the findings of fact, opinions, and recommendations. It is recommended that the Medina City Schools Board of Education accept referee Douglas Godshall's report issued on April 6, 2023, including his findings of fact, opinions, and recommendation to terminate Nick Kaplak's supplemental contract of employment as head varsity baseball coach for good and just cause.
Thank you,
I'll
Mr. Ross.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Any questions or comments from the board regarding this action item?
I'd like to add, I think the line for me that was most important was at the end of the opinion that, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but the baseball diamond or the athletic field is an extension of the classroom, and they are students first And that's the most important thing, being a student in the academics. And for me, personally, that's what I thought was the most important thing to remember in all of this. So I agree 100% with the Mr. Godshall's opinion, so thank you.
Any other board members? I would like to follow up to what Mr. West was saying, and I will quote on page 12 of the referee's opinion. He states, "Imagine that the video was not the baseball field, but from a classroom. Is it possible that the board would put up with a teacher telling the students that their dads look like little girls? Imagine that the teacher advised that he was sick of hearing the criticism from parents about his teaching, or telling students that he has had it with has-been parents trying to tell him how to teach." I don't think us as parents would like a teacher speaking that way to our students in the classroom, and our coaches should not be speaking that way to our students on an athletic field or in any extracurricular activity. I personally find that unacceptable. The referee also goes on to say that academics are much more important than athletic performance, and I agree with that as well. Our job here is to teach our students. Extracurriculars are a privilege. They are not a right, and that goes for our coaches who as well. They should be serving as good role models for our student athletes. That's what I believe, and I will speak as all of the board, that we expect our teachers and coaches to all be role models for our students and to act accordingly. As such, I do also agree with the referee's opinion. He states the last sentence that the decision of the Medina City School District Board of Education is confirmed. I do agree that with him, that he found that the standard for good and just cause, as determined by the board, for Mr. Kaplack's termination. And if there are no other comments, Mr. Chambers, you may call roll, please.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Yes.
Thank you.
And board action item E1 is a resolution for termination of supplemental contract. It is recommended that the Medina City Schools Board of Education adopt a resolution terminating Nick Kaplack's supplemental contract of employment as head varsity baseball coach for good and just cause. Whereas Nick Kaplack is currently employed by the board as a teacher under a written contract issued pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 3319.08, and as a varsity baseball coach under a written supplemental contract issued pursuant to Ohio Revised Section 3319.08. And whereas this board believes a varsity baseball coach is a role model for student athletes and can properly be held to a standard of behavior consistent with the educator's capacity as a role model. And whereas on February 7th, 2022, pursuant to Superintendent Sable's recommendation, this board adopted a resolution indicating its intention to consider the termination of Mr. Kaplack's supplemental varsity baseball coaching contract for good and just cause. And whereas, by way of the same resolution, this board suspended Mr. Kaplack's supplemental varsity baseball coaching contract without pay effective February 7th, 2022, pending the outcome of the termination proceedings. And whereas on February 8th, 2022, Treasurer Chambers provided Mr. Kaplack with written notice of the board's intention to consider termination of his supplemental varsity baseball coaching contract, enclosing a verbatim copy of the aforementioned resolution adopted on February 7th, 2022. And whereas on February 10th, 2022, Mr. Kaplak, by and through his attorneys, provided Treasurer Chambers with a written request for a hearing before an impartial referee pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Sections 3319.16 and 3319.161. And whereas Mr. Kaplak, by and through his attorneys and the board, by and through its attorney, agreed to appoint Mr. Douglas Godshall as the impartial referee pursuant to Ohio Revised Section 3319.161. And whereas referee Godshall held a hearing pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Sections 3319.16 and 3319.161 on December 7th, 2022 and December 8th, 2022, during which a complete stenographic record of the proceeding, including all exhibits, was created by a court reporter. And whereas during the aforementioned hearing, Mr. Kaplak had the opportunity to be present, to be represented by legal counsel, and to take a record of the proceedings, to make opening remarks, to require witnesses to be under oath, to cross-examine witnesses, to require the presence of witnesses pursuant to subpoena, to make closing remarks, and to propose recommended findings of facts and conclusions to referee Godshall. And whereas, based on the testimony of witnesses and other evidence adduced during the aforementioned public hearing, Referee Godshall authored a report on April 6, 2023, wherein Referee Godshall found that Mr. Kaplak's behavior on the bus on May 19, 2021, disparaged parents and students to the point of constituting good and just cause of a fairly serious matter for terminating his supplemental contract as head varsity baseball coach. And Mr. Godshall thereby recommended that the Medina City School District Board of Education move forward with its intended termination of Mr. Kaplak's supplemental contract. And whereas this board considered referee Godshall's report during a publicly held meeting and by a majority vote accepted referee Godshall's report, including his findings of fact, opinions, and recommendations. Now, therefore, be it resolved pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 3319.16 that the Medina City School District Board of Education hereby terminates Mr. Kaplak's supplemental contract of employment as a varsity baseball coach for good and just cause. The grounds for such consideration, each of which is asserted as an independent ground for termination when viewed individually, and each of which is also in the alternative asserted as a ground for termination when considered in combination with one or more of the other grounds herein enumerated are: Number one, during the spring season of 2021, Mr. Kaplak demonstrated behavior unbecoming of a Medina City School District coach when he lectured student athletes in an inappropriately disparaging manner, including belittling certain athletes in front of the team for lackluster performances, aiming degrading language at student athletes and their parents, and disparaging student athletes' parents for their interference with the baseball team. In total, Mr. Kaplak's post-game lecture did nothing to improve performance or team morale and was an inappropriate coaching method at the high school level. Following this incident, a complaint was filed by the parent of a student athlete alleging that Mr. Kaplak's post-game lecture amounted to legal harassment. In August of 2021, a harassment investigation was conducted. The district concluded that Mr. Kaplak's behavior did not amount to legal harassment, but was nonetheless incredibly inappropriate. Moreover, during the investigation, several student athletes described some incidents of notable concern, including Mr. Kaplak's unprofessional demeanor with student athletes, which was described as very blunt, not super friendly, doesn't let smaller things go, and doesn't motivate you. These statements did represent a theme the district heard from every student athlete it talked to, whether they were part of the initial complaint or not. The incident in the spring season of 2021 was another example of Mr. Kaplak's historical pattern of unprofessional and inappropriate interactions with student athletes and parents, which includes another harassment investigation conducted in January of 2019, which similarly found Mr. Kaplak's behavior to be inappropriate. Despite the district's attempts to help Mr. Kaplak improve in this area of his coaching duties, Mr. Kaplak continues to struggle to the detriment of his student athletes and team. The incident in the spring season of 2021 represents another example of Mr. Kaplak's historic pattern of poor student-athlete supervision and management, including setting a poor example of appropriate decorum to student-athletes. This pattern of behavior also includes student-athlete management concerns in April 2015 and the spring of 2017. Despite the district's attempts to help Mr. Kaplak improve in this area of his coaching duties, Mr. Kaplak continues to struggle to the detriment of his student-athletes and team. The incident in the spring season of 2021 is another example of Mr. Kaplak's historical pattern of making morally questionable decisions, which sets a bad example for his student-athletes and harms his relationships with parents, the community, and baseball programs outside Medina City schools. This pattern of behavior also includes incidents from April 2017, May 2019, and July 2019. Despite the district's attempts to help Mr. Kaplak improve in this area of his coaching duties, Mr. Kaplak continues to struggle to the detriment of his student-athletes and team. Be it further resolved that in the board's judgment, the specific misconduct identified above, including Mr. Kaplak's ongoing pattern of concerning behavior, has soured his relationship with several important people and entities, including local youth baseball organizations, student-athletes, the parents of student-athletes, and coaches of programs outside Medina City schools. Consequently, Mr. Kaplak's misconduct has negatively affected his credibility and authority as a varsity baseball coach, thereby substantially diminishing his ability to effectively conduct the essential functions, duties, and responsibilities of the district's varsity baseball coach. And be it further resolved that, consistent with Ohio Revised Code Section 3319.16, the board authorizes and directs the district's treasurer to enter the board's decision to terminate Nick Kaplak's supplemental varsity baseball coaching contract on its official minutes, to issue official written notice of the same to Mr. Kaplak via certified mail, return receipt requested, and to resolve any remaining items under the treasurer's jurisdiction with respect to the termination of Mr. Kaplak's supplemental varsity baseball coaching contract.
Make a motion, we approve action item E1.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second to approve action item E1.
Thank you, Mr. West. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West? Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols? Aye. Mr. West?
Yes.
And Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Who wrote that resolution?